Do we need to turn down for what?
Turn down for what?
Butterscotch.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 44 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I make web advertisements.
I'm Sam and I make art advertisements.
And today is April 5th, 2016. Before we get started, there's going to be
Fools,
lots...
it's April 1st.
Just kidding.
And there's going to be a lot of profanity, innuendos, adult themes throughout this podcast. So
Some
if you
adult
are...
dancing, in fact.
There's going to be gyrating, grinding, and hipping.
And jump jiving.
Driving, a jazz hands.
Perhaps wailing and jazz hands will make an appearance as well.
Wailing, wailing and the tearing of clothes. And
We may
jazz.
also be wailing, which is the act of hunting
Murdering
whales.
whales,
So
which
that
again is a very adult thing to do.
Do not come along.
Yeah, kids should not go whaling.
Kids should not wail.
Or listen to this podcast. They're related.
Yeah. So speaking of adult themes, we played the fuck out of a bunch of games this weekend.
We did. Well, let's talk about why.
Yeah.
So you are
everyone's-
great at these transitions.
I love
Just
your
wanna-
segues. I think the question of why it was that we took like 4 days to just play video games. Is a
Yeah,
good
that
one.
seems like us being lazy devs, doesn't it?
It does. But here's an interesting thing. It was hard for me to play video games all day. I was being lazy about playing video games.
Now,
Yeah,
that sounds
yeah.
like a really serious first world problem. I'm
It
just gonna
was.
throw that
I woke
out
up,
there.
I was like, oh, I don't want to play games.
So I just have to.
I think it's because we put ourselves into a mindset of we need to play games for research, because we went so long without doing any gaming because we were working so damn much that we missed out on a lot of stuff and we forgot what's out there. So we
And
had
it
to
was
go
for
play a bunch of
research.
stuff.
So we have to. It's different than just playing a game for shits and giggles, right? Because you have to. The goal is to understand what the game is doing that's interesting or that isn't interesting, so you can come away with some game.
So you can copy it for later.
Yeah. So you can
Yep.
copy paste and then reskin and publish your clone.
Boom.
Good artists copy, great artists clone,
That's right.
as they say.
But so we played a crap ton of games, and everything from stuff that was out like 2 years ago to stuff that was
Or older, even.
newer. But I think there's a few of them that we want to talk about. I want to hit Factorio first
'Kay.
because it's the single player one, and it's Seth and I played it.
Yeah.
Adam did not. So
I
Adam
did
can
not
kinda be
play it.
the-
Tell me about this game.
Adam could
What
be
is
the fool in the
Factorio?
room. So Factorio, the idea is that you make a big automated, essentially like an automated factory line. You happen to be outside, and for some reason there's aliens trying to kill
It's a
you. But
top-down view of a game.
it's also very ugly. It is an ugly.
One of the
that
most
was,
hideous
that was
things
all
I've
I
ever seen.
gathered from the Steam page was the ugliness of the game.
Yeah, it is. It is an ugly title, but there's a reason. Well, I guess maybe there's not a reason for it being ugly.
There's
but
no reason for it to be that.
There's it looks incredible at a certain scale. What I mean by that is Factorio is all about building like assembly lines for machines to gather resources, build stuff for you, assemble those things into other pieces, and then also like use those to build other stuff that builds itself. So it's this big crazy thing where you start off with just like there's just piles of resources. You put a mine down on top of it, then you build like a little treadmill sort of thing that carries resources that come off that mine down to some other thing that processes them, that passes them on to something else, etc. And so you build up these big processes that end up looking like these insane factories. And so, I mean, if you just watch the trailer for it, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, where the guy drives down, he like chops down a piece of wood, puts it on a one of these assembly line things, and it goes down, follows the piece of wood, and then it goes and it shows this just insane sort of contraption going on down below where he's made this, I don't know, like 800 piece factory set. So Factorio is very neato, but
It
the
is
weird,
neato. That's a good
it's
word
a good way to
for
put
it.
it. Like it's neato. It's a great take on the crafting thing, and it's really fun for the automated purposes. It feels like it was made by a programmer, in the sense that like
In the sense that it's ugly.
it's kind of ugly and everything's all about automation all the time.
Yeah.
And so it does feel like a programmer sort of game. But
Adam would love it,
I think you actually would like it a lot. But
I need to give it a try.
it suffers from this really weird thing, which is that it actually does a pretty good job opening up. Like the whole game is very complex. It does a great job though at first of kind of opening you up to how the different systems work, how to really make an intricate factory line that makes sense, and how to shoot aliens in the face. And then once that tutorial's done, the first level of the campaign that you start with a factory like that's up and running that is probably like 3 to 8 fold more complicated than anything that you built during the
They just give it to
tutorial.
you.
They just give it to you. And so I
weird.
saw this thing and I was like, I don't know. I don't want to touch this. This is better than anything I've made. I have no idea what to do with this fucking thing.
The weird thing about that is, the joy of that comes from planning out the automation and building these cool, elaborate systems. And what makes them understandable, even though they're elaborate, is the fact that you pieced them together yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, it's just like a big piece of software, right? Like,
yeah, if you're looking at someone else's code, it's like usually very hard to read, right?
Yeah.
Which
So
we'll get to
yeah,
later.
I had the same feeling. I went through the tutorial of Factorio. I was like, just fuck yes,
So
this is
cool.
fantastic. And then all of a sudden, I had to do work. They're just like, here,
right.
we'll
Try to
figure this out.
Yeah.
And then
I
I
think
think
that's an
well, I'm
important-
done.
So the important game dev lesson here must be
What's the
make
takeaway?
sure your tutorial is good.
Yeah.
Well, not just that, but I think this was a failure to understand what was super enjoyable about the game, which is building the damn factory.
Right.
And being handed a finished factory is not fun. So yeah,
So I'm
Anyway,
not sure
so
what they're
the
doing.
gist
there.
is worth playing, but
it's
Definitely
worth playing, but just be prepared because once you're done with the tutorial, you're gonna get slapped in the mouth.
yeah. And I think I believe there's a free to play mode, which are like a free play mode. Sorry, not free to play. A free to play mode where you have to pay $1 for every asset you put on the ground.
Yay!
There's a free play mode where I haven't actually tried that one, but my assumption is after doing that campaign that probably just does what I actually want, which is just plops you
lets
into a
you
world
build
with nothing.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it may be
Yeah.
more.
I may give
worthwhile.
it another go.
Very cool.
And then otherwise, we played Warframe and The Division.
And let's
which-
talk about those because that's an interesting pair.
I want to talk about them in tandem. So a quick sort of synopsis if you don't know much about these two games. Warframe is something that I would consider a co-op online third-person shooter RPG. Does that
Sure.
sound fair?
That's a lot of genres. You
Why
just
not?
slam together.
Yep.
like a
Well, I mean,
maniac.
each of those has some element in Warframe.
Also
And The
stealth.
Division is the same thing.
Mhm.
Okay. They're both online co-op third-person shooter RPGs.
And I think in both you can play in squads of up to 4.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's the difference? The difference comes from the moment-to-moment gameplay and the loop structures that the two games employ. In Warframe, you are what we have internally referred to as a space ninja.
Yeah.
And the whole point of almost everything in the game seems to be revolved around making you feel as unbelievably badass as possible.
Yeah.
You're basically fighting an army of clones that are constantly degenerating, and they've augmented themselves with mechanical parts, as well as crazy robots and other insane shit. You have weapons like laser whips. You have all kinds of abilities, like you can summon tornadoes.
You
can
electrocute everybody.
Yeah, you can just do all kinds of crazy, crazy stuff. It's just way over the top, and it's really, really immensely satisfying
Well, I think
to
the
play.
important thing about it is that it plays actually like a 3D, like an insane 3D platformer. I think it's a very important note.
Oh yeah, movement
Which is
is
the-
really important.
Yeah,
There's, like,
movement's
double
key
jumping.
to everything. You can wall jump and basically wall run infinitely, actually, and also wall climb infinitely. If you just jump straight up in a wall, you just keep on going. And your character also can kind of fly. So if you jump in the air and then you zoom in, like you want to, like zoom in with a bow to shoot someone from far away, then you actually start kind of like you do like a
float.
slow hover. Yeah, and you can shoot people in the air.
So you can do all these really cool. They feel like you're doing trick shots because like you'll jump in the air, you'll do a flip, and then you zoom in on a target, and then you because you're not falling or flying through the air so fast now, you can actually line up the sights and shoot. So every element of the combat in Warframe is super satisfying.
Well, and then the metagame too, though, because it has a ton of RPG aspects where, RPG basically just means you level up your thing and make it better over time. And that happens kind of within and outside of normal gameplay.
Yep.
So in the case of Warframe, every damn thing that has to do with your gameplay, so your weapons and the character you play as well as modifiers and and all those things have their own upgrade tracks.
There's loops on loops.
There's
Just loops
on
all the way
loops.
down.
So yeah, and if
Yeah,
you want to, you can make a new weapon by crafting it, and so that has its own loop structure because you have to find all the components
Well,
and
hang
you
on,
finally
before-
craft a thing. Well, yeah, I just
before
want to
we
say
go
like
further there.
the idea there is you got all these loops stacked on top of each other on top of the really epic feeling moment to moment gameplay, so that the whole experience like just really propels you constantly forward in the game.
But what seems to be interesting about this, though, because to me, so that's like the combat and the general moment-to-moment gameplay in Warframe is that extremely fluid, essentially 3D platform ninja-ing, right?
Yep.
Now, in the Division, it's actually, they take the opposite approach, which is tactical, very very high-risk movement, and also like it's not fluid much at all. So you're
high risk movement, meaning you're constantly being shot at and you have to stay behind cover
right,
like
so,
95% of the time.
Yeah, so it's about clever use of cover, and then also as a squad, it's actually usually about finding good sort of angles of flanking, like sending a person over to make sure that you can attack a target, from multiple sides and you're not getting flanked by the enemy. And so it's much more tactical in that regard. Warframe, interestingly, like as you add more, there are stealth elements to Warframe. If you're playing by yourself, you usually actually want to be very sneaky and like kill things without them knowing that you're there. But in the case of Warframe, as your squad size increases, so as you go up to like 4 people, it just turns into the more people you add, the more mayhem ensues because you have too many people to make it so that you're not going to cause an alarm. And so everyone just goes kind of nuts. And so there's explosions going on, everyone's beating stuff up. But in the Division, like the more players you have, the more people you have to worry about from a tactical standpoint, but also the more elaborate those tactical maneuvers can be. So I think the Division actually scales better on a squad-based sort of thing than just from a moment-to-moment gameplay than Warframe does. But it plays completely differently. But interestingly, I think most interestingly, the moment-to-moment gameplay of both Warframe and the Division, to me, they're equally good, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think they both feel great.
They're
very different.
Very different from each other.
So this is why I wanted to talk about the loops after establishing that. So like the moment-to-moment gameplay of both these games is phenomenal, but on opposite sides.
And they're both hobby games, right? So basically, if you want to play these games, you're gonna have to choose one or the other, pretty much.
Right.
Yeah, they take a lot of time. They take a lot of time commitment to, I think, the full enjoyment of, but that's only because they're so huge.
Yeah.
Like there's always something to do in these games.
And the interesting thing, though, is that as Adam was talking about the way Warframe implemented its loop structures, where there's just loops on loops, everything that you can get that you can use to modify yourself can also itself be modified to be more powerful, such that there ends up being just a ton of gameplay and you just always feel like you're making really good progress. In the Division, what we all found was that the reason for that progress, the supposed reason that you were, getting these new materials or upgrading these buildings or doing research or whatever, fell kind of flat because everything felt like just a side grade of sorts.
Yeah, it didn't feel like you were becoming more awesome, really.
Right. They had more choices available to you, but you never actually had more things that you could do at once. So a good example of this is they have a talent system. And I think it's like every 5 levels or something, you get 1 new talent point. But you actually unlock new sort of talents to choose from much more rapidly than that, such that you end up, I think we were level 9. We played for like 6 hours or so before we quit. But so each of us had 4 different talents that we could choose from, but you could only actually pick one of them. And
they weren't really that big of a deal anyways.
Yeah, and so like it has this ring of sort of like faux specialization to it, I guess is the way I'd put it. Like it didn't seem like it mattered. Each of us had different skills, and then we all kind of ended up honing into similar skills actually. So Adam and I both used the turret system as a secondary skill, and then I was using the remote detonator, which I think Adam had also, or someone else had also. And so like,
well, I have to say though, I had a different experience because I just picked all of the abilities that revolved around healing. So I definitely felt like I was specialized because I was the only one who could keep you guys from being
I would
murdered.
agree for sure. But as far as the actual approach to besides the healing aspect of it, as far as the approach to the game,
yeah, I was still just running around shooting things in the face 98% of the time.
right?
So
And it was just it was very interesting playing those 2 games right next to each other, especially because the Division is like $60, and none of us have also dropped AAA monies on a game in a long time. But we decided, since everyone's talking about the Division and about how good it was or whatever else, just how interesting it was with regards to the stuff, that we should do it and give it a go for research purposes. So we did. And Warframe is completely free. And I mean, like, free as in, like,
Free.
You can really just not pay any money. One of the top reviews is some guy who's played for like 3,000 hours, and he's dropped $25 into the thing.
Right.
You know, like it's genuinely a game that you can.
Well,
very
it's
much
actually
enjoy
one of the
free.
interesting aspects of it is that it almost encourages you to not spend money.
Yeah.
Given the costs of things, it's actually all quite expensive if you want to buy something in the game. And you still, even if you buy a thing, for the most part, you still can't have it until you find all of its parts and stuff. So there's actually kind of a weird disincentive in that as a free-to-play game to actually buy stuff.
Well, and if you buy something, so I spent some money in Warframe because I thought it's a fantastic game and I want to support it. So I threw down $20 to get. I didn't really know what I wanted to get. I just wanted to pay the developers. So then I just picked a couple weapons and a different Warframe to try out. A Warframe is kind of like a character class. But in all three cases, I actually preferred what I started with. So I tried out the two new weapons. I tried out the new Warframe for quite a while. And slowly over time, I just was like, nah. And I just reverted back to the two weapons in the Warframe that I started with. So it didn't really matter. You know, it didn't like make me overpowered or anything. It was just a different way of playing. So
Yeah, and those ones are interesting because in this case in particular with Warframe, they would benefit hugely from allowing people to actually try out stuff before they bought it.
A la
to see if
League
they
of
liked it.
Legends.
Right, but which they don't seem to have for some reason that I can't figure out. So it was very interesting playing those two games, and then on top of that, all the other ones. I guess the larger point with that is that after, I don't know, a good 4 or 5 days of just playing a crap load of games and then talking about them very in depth, we got some really fun ideas for what we want to do next, which we're not going to talk about, but sometime
yeah,
later.
So I'd say kind of the verdict on the two is they're both fantastic games. The Division, if you're looking for a more sort of like slower paced, more strategic combat, I'd say,
and more realistic, I guess. I mean,
in
a
some
sense.
ways,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it
Well,
is the case
it's-
that you're gonna unload 3 full clips of an assault rifle into a guy wearing a sweatshirt and not do enough damage to him, and he's gonna walk up to you with a baseball bat and one shot you. I mean, that is
he's wearing
that is
a
a
Kevlar
thing.
sweatshirt, Seth. Come on.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
that-
basically
that
a
is-
realism. They take realism so far that the aspects of it that are clearly a game become even more clearly a game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Whereas with Warframe, everything feels weirdly totally fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you
Warframe-
get hit with a flaming laser whip, then that wouldn't be surprising either if it one-shotted you or only did like 10% damage. Like you
there's
don't have a
generally no
reference for
real
that.
life. Yeah, there's no real life analog to being hit by a fire laser.
Well,
whip.
and being a crazy like robot like mechanical fighting machine, right?
It's true.
In that
Yeah.
context, because like you just it's abstracted enough that you never have to worry about whether what's happening makes any sense. And I think it's a lot of why that game works so well.
Yeah, and I have to say, the moment-to-moment combat to me in War, personally, I prefer between the two. I prefer Warframe. It reminds me of. I feel like I have this vision in my head of like a 90s commercial of a kid sitting down to play a video game, and like he turns on the screen and then just like fucking energy beams are just shooting out of the screen and his hair is like blowing back and stuff. Like it's just so over the top. I kind of that's what it feels like to play it. It's just super fun. So
Yeah.
then otherwise we were playing some of those games. We had a few meetings over this past week, including talking to some people at Microsoft about getting Crashlands onto Xbox.
Yeah.
And into the Windows 10 sort of ecosystem. But that kind of led to a much broader discussion, which is something that I think we should talk about on the podcast.
Let's do it.
Because business is weird and hard.
Yeah. So this problem is a problem that anybody in a small studio will face, which is something that we often refer to as just bandwidth, which is we only have 3 people that we can apply to problems. And if we have 10 different problems, those problems can only be solved 3 at a time,
You
right?
gotta go into a queue.
And in the case of something like Crashlands has a huge number of, we'll call them problems. Really, they're just things that we need to do.
Almost more like opportunities. In
Yeah.
this case.
So things like trying to get it onto PlayStation, trying to get it onto Xbox, getting a DRM free version put together and putting it onto GOG.
Getting translations made.
Yeah, translation engine. Like there's all kinds of stuff that we want to do and we need to do.
Finishing
for
the creator.
for the health of the game, to bring more opportunities for us as a business and to get the game into the hands of more people. But every day that we spend doing that is another day that we aren't developing new games for our players. And both of those things are equally important, right? So working on our older games and making them even better and giving all kinds of cool new stuff to our existing players is a really big deal, and it's something we want to do. But we also want to be making new stuff. So after some discussion, we decided we just need more people to take care of this. There's just no other way around it. We can't keep doing everything in sequence. We need to dual core this.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to be, this is all tentative in the sense of we're still in the planning stages, but we will be posting a blog post about opening up a position for a role at the company that we are going to refer to as something like life support. The idea being this will be a person who is essentially a game programmer, but they will be the one who takes responsibility for keeping our existing portfolio alive. Mm-hmm. So they'll be doing content patches, rebalancing patches for all of our existing games, adding even more cross-game perks and stuff like that through Butterscotch ID, as well as bringing them to new stores, trying to find ways to translate and localize, just all of this stuff that we want to do, but we can't do yet because it would be at the sacrifice of making new stuff. Yeah. So we'll have a bunch of info on that on the blog. But yeah, we're gonna be hiring. So
yeah. Well, and I want to add to this that just like the last time, we talked about this a couple months ago. Right after Crashlands launched, because at that time too, we were talking about expanding the studio and why we would want to do that and what that would look like. And one of the really weird, hard problems that comes out of this is how do you actually hire people? Like how do you find people who match the job you're trying to create and make sure that they can do the job you want them to do, that they're a good fit for the culture of your company, all that kind of stuff. And and if you look at what most companies do, they basically collect resumes, look at them and see if they seem to match. Read them. I guess.
Well, you went to school. Okay.
Call you for an interview.
That'll
do. If they think that they like you, then they hire you. And of course, it's not quite as simple as that, but that's the general structure of the thing. But as we all know, people, resumes don't mean a whole hell of a lot, and more importantly, a person's history is much less important than what they can do right now.
Also, what they can grow to do,
and what they can grow to do.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Is the part of the
if somebody has 30 years of experience, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be really good for the position that you have.
Well, in fact, it might be detrimental because they might be too stuck in previous ways of doing things, because things like the games industry move so fast and change so fast that adaptability is by far the most important thing.
Well, I mean, I think the greater point, though, is just that we realized that we would never be able to be hired ourselves into our own company.
All three of us, well, not into our company,
jobs, you mean.
into our industry. I think based on the skills that the three of us have on paper, none of us are hireable in other studios.
Right. Like, what am I going to write in my resume? Can't draw.
Can't draw, but can do vector art.
Well, that's probably not totally fair. I mean, the fact is, we have a portfolio of stuff that we've done. We have we have 3 years experience doing those things.
But
if you look at minimum requirements, they'll be like, here are all the languages you need to know and blah, blah, blah. And like as a programmer, for me especially, I just don't have those things.
Well, I'm not even thinking about this from the standpoint of now, because where we are now is highly specialized based on what we've been doing for 3 years. I'm thinking about this from a 3 years ago standpoint, which is okay.
Yeah, you were a psychology major with little programming experience and no art experience.
Right.
Seth
like,
was
no fucking way anybody would ever hire
legal
that
school
kid, right?
dropout just learning how to program.
Right. And you're a PhD in molecular biology.
Well, I wasn't at that time. I was
You're
not.
a candidate,
Yeah,
right?
But
I mean, like,
well, to be fair though, we did get hired, but that was through game jams.
Yeah,
that we did.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I think that's the interesting thing is like so I guess that actually directly informs what's coming next, which is the method by which we're using to actually hire someone has much less to do with paper-based qualifications and much more to do just with what we can actually see as far as capacity to learn, capacity to get something done, and just general grit. So what we're going to do is essentially a game jam sort of a thing, a series of them.
In a manner of speaking, yeah.
Where because this role in particular is going to have to involve teasing Seth's code apart. We're basically
Good luck.
We're going to build our own game here sometime in the next week or so. Take 2 days to do it and do our own little internal jam. And with this game, which is going to be buggy and a 2-day game, we're going to send that out, make that available for people who pass the first hurdle of getting in, and then ask them to essentially prioritize based on some values, various changes and updates and stuff like that they would like to make to the game, and just essentially see what someone can actually do, will actually do in a very limited time frame.
And then actually go implement some of those changes and show us that they could figure out how to do the things that they think are important with that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the job is effectively is going to be this person taking the games that we've made, finding ways to make them better, which does mean that they would have to take a critical eye toward them, right? And try to think of things that are wrong with them or that could be better, and actually go in and edit the code. And so that's going to be what the application process is.
Yeah. So we think this is going to be, we got to still put this thing together, and who knows how it'll turn out, but we think this is going to be a very cool way to filter people and find people who are really into what we're doing and can actually do the job that we're hiring for.
Very exciting, crazy stuff.
We'll put out more news, of course, as we work on that. So if you're interested, stay tuned.
Yeah, keep an eye on the blog. That'll be where the first batch of news goes.
Yeah, we'll be putting up very, very soon a list of kind of the rough background information that would probably be good for you to have an eye on or know before the whole thing even starts. So it's either talks to understand or to hear, books to read, articles to read, that sort of thing. So that'll be coming up soon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I think that's all we got for news. It's kind of a big one.
It's kind of a big news piece.
Yeah, we kind of hit it there at the end, though. So if you were listening to this and were like, "Oh, I'm tired of hearing about these games. I want to skip to the questions," you probably missed this hiring opportunity.
Hidden. It's hidden.
Well, hopefully you read the blog then. So
Yeah.
But yeah, let's go over to player questions. And these questions come from podcast.bsketch.net. They get refreshed every week.
And by that, we mean we delete the crap out of the old ones.
We don't just delete them. We delete the crap out of them.
Yeah, like as hard as possible.
Yeah. So if you want to get your questions into future podcasts, just head on over to podcast.bsketch.net. And because of the fact that we delete the crap out of them, any given week, you actually have a pretty reasonable chance of getting your question on here. So by all means, ask away.
And I want to mention, we did have the same question asked twice now by the same guy, so I wanted to address it, who asked, what happened to Grubby's eye? So I've got that in my wheelhouse for one of the next stories to produce in the lore series. So that will be coming up, but...
Do you know who asked that? So,
so
we can give him credit?
Let me look it up real quick.
Rupert.
It was Toby X.
Toby X. There you go.
So we'll be writing a story to explain to you what happened.
Stay tuned for Grubby Eye news.
All right. So first question of the day is a development question. And this comes from Frog Ninja, who asks, what are your thoughts on the RPGization of all genres? Does every game really need level and skill progression?
I mean, probably if we go into like the extreme, no. But I think in general, it makes games more. Well, I guess what it does is it sort of makes you feel much more of that effect of having a thing that you've invested in get better over time.
And it's a fantastic way to introduce really, really complicated stuff in a piecemeal fashion.
Yeah.
So one of my classic games that I always refer to is World of Warcraft. By the time you get to level cap in that game, you have maybe 50 unique abilities.
Yeah.
If you were just handed that right out of the gate instead of getting them one at a time through the leveling process, holy hell, you would be It would be like playing Factorio. So. I mean, it's just a really nice way to sort of drip feed new and interesting ways for the player to play in such a way that's not overwhelming.
Yeah, I guess really the question then to back it up is what does a level system generally allow you to do in a game space? And then backing that up further, or I guess going from there, why would you not want to put that in? I guess to turn the question.
Yeah, I do like that idea that Seth put out of basically saying a game actually consists of just a ton of complex stuff that you can do. And what the RPG aspect does is actually takes away all of those pieces and then gives them to you in a small number at a time so that you actually get to learn and become an expert at the game.
Okay, so
That's one cool thing.
Right,
One
so
cool aspect.
RPGization helps the player actually learn game content at an appropriate rate.
Yeah.
Which allows the game to be more complex.
And I think there's one, to me personally, there's one circumstance where it's definitely not appropriate.
What's that?
And that is in a player versus player competitive multiplayer environment. So one of the great things about Rocket League is the fact that it does not have RPG elements. It's a pure skill game, and because it's essentially the game is how good are you at hitting soccer balls with a remote control car.
Right.
And if somehow you could level up your car to just make it faster or better or have a tighter turning radius or whatever,
You have an unfair advantage.
yeah, so you end up with a compounded difference between experienced players and newer players, because not only do new players suck at the game, their cars also suck, and so they end up getting pushed out really early. And I feel like this is something that kind of happened with Tribes Ascend
And Team Fortress 2.
and Team Fortress 2.
Yeah, I
where
mean, the reason
basically-
I stopped playing Team Fortress 2 was as soon as they introduced their market where you could get these like bats that do a one-shot kill and all this kind of stuff.
yeah.
It went from a game where I'd become pretty good at all the characters. I knew how they worked, and somebody wasn't going to be better than me because they had better stuff.
Well, this sounds more like a problem with matchmaking, though, honestly, than it does with the RPGization. Because, like, so for example, taking Rocket League as an easy example, if it could be the case that you could specialize your car, you know, you could level up your goaling abilities via goaling and unlock some special skills or something like that, but you're always placed in the appropriate tier with other people who, you know, had the same opportunities as you, then I would disagree that would cause a problem.
Yeah, but
That's
I think
probably, that's fair.
that's an excellent point, but I think there's a sort of a caveat to that, which is that requires a huge number of players, because let's say you have a game that has 100 power levels for the character, for the player, and each of those levels is significant in some way, right?
Right.
You generally want to pair players against levels that are very close to themselves, but that means you have essentially 100 brackets to match people up in, and if you don't, and also as people are constantly progressing through them, the longer the game has been around, the fewer people
they
there
cluster
are at the
towards
bottom.
the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you end up with this problem where you just don't have enough players at the lower end.
Actually, it's probably that the middle end dries up because you have a bunch of new players that quit, and then a bunch
Right.
of-
Yeah. I suppose it's probably kind of a U shape. But in any case, you know, if the goal is to match people against other people of the same, you know, power level, then it does get tricky. And I think it works with something like League of Legends because it's a free to play game and it's so huge.
Right.
Right. But yeah, it gets much trickier if you aren't something that has 60 million daily active users or something
Right.
to choose from.
Well, I guess the general gist I get from like the goal of RPGization, as Frog Ninja put it, is that not only does it help as far as teaching as a teaching tool that seems integrated into the game environment as opposed to just being like a hand-holdy tutorial piece, but I do think it lends a lot of power to the overall design of a game as far as how it makes the player feel, right? So
Yeah, definitely.
an easy example of that is actually Rocket League for me in the opposite sense, which is that because there's nothing for me to work toward, I don't have any sort of drive outside of Rocket League to go play it, aside from the fact that it's just like fun to play as a moment to moment thing.
Yeah, you're not immersed in the game.
Right, I'm not
You're
thinking about
clearly playing a game.
Whereas when I think about Warframe, right, when we finished playing Warframe on Friday afternoon or Thursday afternoon, you know, I went up and I did some reading about it, about how to like min-max stuff. I popped in the next morning to start something crafting since things take like 10 hours or so to build. I was thinking about how I could change my mods. Like it was a whole different thing. And then I was also looking, I think the nice thing about RPGization is it gives you something to look forward to in the game context where maybe there wouldn't actually be anything. And it might be false, right? So that's the case of something like what we felt a bit in The Division, which honestly felt like exactly this problem actually, which is like
it felt like a tacked on
it
pointless RPGization.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
if it is tacked on like that, I mean, the players can tell, obviously, and it ends up being weird because you end up doing work where previously you would have just been playing the game, right? You end up doing work, but then the work feels hollow, and so even
So
though
it
you work
feels
towards
like
something,
work.
it actually feels worse. Yeah.
that
so I
actually
guess-
is a really interesting point I hadn't thought about. The idea that if a game is pure skill, then so if a game has that RPG character customization and character improvement kind of an aspect to it, then you can almost in a way play the game even while you're not playing it just by thinking about it.
Yeah.
Right. Like just by thinking about and planning what you want to do, and like going up and Googling things or whatever. And the thing is, like with Rocket League, I can watch as many, aerial hit montages as I want. I'm still
that's
going
not
to be
gonna help
garbage
you.
at them. Yeah, because the only thing I can do is do a shitload of them and try to.
Well,
get
actually, yeah.
better.
So what an RPG allows you to do is sort of make up for skill differentials by
With power.
spending by power, by spending
and,
more time
and thought. Yeah.
thinking through a problem, so you can basically apply some sort of a workaround to a skill, to a missing skill problem.
And it was also interesting because we played a bunch of different games last week, and one of those that I played was Shelter 2. Which, for those of you who haven't played, is you play as a mother lynx, and you have like 4 cubs that you start with, and then your goal is to like feed them and make them big, and you're also running around in this tundra. Now, the problem I had with it, first of all, it was beautiful, I loved it, it was really good, but I ended up refunding it, and here's the reason why, is because I couldn't figure out what the hell I was actually supposed to be doing, and
It's a bit of a problem.
like, the gameplay itself was great. I mean, like you're chasing down rabbits and stuff. You're trying to get away from wolves on occasion. But like I kept on losing my babies. It's like one of them got eaten by wolves when I didn't know what was going on. Another one just disappeared. I'm still not sure where that one went. So I just have 2 babies left, but I'm very unclear as like what. There's no words in it. There's no guide as far as like, oh, like you need to go do this thing. And I think like I have much more of an achievement focus in particular, just in life, but also with regards to games. And so not knowing how to make progress can be very dissuading, I think. So
And I would agree with that. I think that's exactly the kind of game that is, though, where its whole purpose is to basically be a simulator where you're given a set of realistic rules just about how the world works. And there's nothing you're supposed to be doing, right? You're just it's kind of like, it's
You're
like
just
EVE, it's like
there.
EVE Online if there weren't other players.
Which sort of is the point.
Right? Just
Yeah.
sort of point. Is it actually the aspects of it that make it game-like, meaning there's a set of rules you're working to understand and working against so that you can achieve some sort of domination over the thing. It's basically taken that away because now it's a simulation where you're just doing stuff within the confines of the rules.
Right.
And what an RPG does is it basically allows you to, either in a really simple way, tack on kind of those
goalposts.
Yeah,
in a sense.
goalposts of things that you can do that mark your progress of understanding the rule set, therefore making it a game, right? That allows you to take a thing like this game and convert it from just a purely a simulation to something that actually feels like a game without actually changing the behavior of the game itself.
Right.
So then
I
the
think that's-
question of, does every game really need level and skill progression? No, but it helps in a lot of cases.
Yeah, well, I guess
Right.
that's
It
my
can help.
answer. Is like it's like being like, does everybody really need like a sweet car that they can get to everywhere from?
No, but it'd
with,
be great.
Yeah, exactly. It would be
If
great.
we all had one.
All right, next question comes. This is more of a businessy question, and this comes from Pixel and Bracket, which is a pretty cool name. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on releasing a free version and a paid version of a game on the various app stores?
Worst thing ever.
Why? But why? I mean, like, why? Because it makes sense on first blush, right?
Well, it's basically asking. It's the question of a demo.
Kind of. It's
Well, let's not say it's a demo. Let's say it's actually 2
this
different
is literally
versions.
2 separate versions.
So
which
let's say Crashlands.
It has
Crashlands
all of
with
the
ads.
disadvantages of a demo
Oh, I see.
without any of the positives.
So it's more like a free to play and a paid. It's not free. It's a free
This
to play
is-
and a paid.
Yeah, let's go
version.
with that.
This is how I believe Angry Birds got its start, if I'm
Well,
not
this-
mistaken.
Well, yeah, I mean, this used to be the only way you could do it.
I
because
might
there
be
weren't in-app
mistaken.
Purchases.
But yeah, before the concept of in-app purchases existed, there were free games and there were paid games. I might be completely wrong about this shit. I don't know. I'm usually wrong about most things.
I think you're right about this. Pretty
But
sure.
yeah, the problem with demos is that statistics seem to indicate that demos actually make people less likely to buy things.
by about 50%.
Seem to. I can't say that this is actually true. But I
There
think
was a pretty good just rational argument for for that, and I can't remember. It was by one of the big YouTube channels that just dissects video game stuff. I can't remember which one, but they basically made the point that there are sort of 3 states that your game can be in, and the same 3 states that your demo can be in, which is basically how good and interesting it is, and basically how good or interesting your demo is determines whether or not somebody will get your game. But those 2 things are basically uncorrelated from each other.
Yeah, you might have a very rough around the edges first 15 minutes of the game experience, but then it really opens up and gets super
then
badass.
nobody will buy it. Or you make that free demo and it's really good, but then the game is bad, so the game has bad reviews. And people will do their research, right? So if they play the demo and it's really good, but then they go to look at the game and see that it has bad reviews, they'll be like, oh, I guess the game's not as good as the demo, and they won't buy it anyway.
But here's another interesting case, which is actually Factorio again, because they do have a demo, and the demo is the first. It's actually the whole tutorial
Before you get thrown into the hard part, or the
if I would have, because I bought it up front, so it's like whatever. But if I would have done the demo, I mean, I would have gotten excited enough to buy the game. I guarantee it. But if then what I would have gotten with that was a campaign where I'm like, what the fuck? I don't think I would be a pleased person.
Yeah, well, it actually makes you more likely to leave a bad review and therefore sink the game because you feel like you got bait and switched.
Right.
I think my
the only
position,
case it's going to work out well for you is if you basically have a really good demo leading to a really good game, in which case the really good game would stand on its own.
Yeah, my position on demos is it's a thing that shouldn't have to exist. So when you want to watch a movie, for example, and you will pay, $12 for a movie ticket or something, which is more than a lot of games are. So, these are equivalent entertainment forms in terms of how much you will spend on it. You don't expect that the studio that made the movie will also offer a free first 20-minute preview of the movie for you so you can decide whether to watch the rest of it.
On the other hand, it does give you free 2-minute previews.
Yeah, but with trailers. But games do that too, right? I mean, games have trailers. I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like demos. I don't know.
Well, so let's not talk about this as a demo, though. Let's talk about this as a free-to-play version and a paid version, because it's a much more interesting experimental line to go down than because all of us agree that doing a demo of a game is a terrible idea. But what about the actual case of in something like Crashlands doing a paid version, which is just straight up $5 and you get what you get right now, or there's a free version where every, say, 15 minutes of gameplay you have to watch a video ad to continue playing. Let's just say that's the model because I said so. Okay.
I would make it way fewer minutes, like 5. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Or we put timers, we add additional timers to everything and make you pay to get through them or whatever. It doesn't matter. Right. But
what would be the pros and cons?
Well, I think to me, you end up with, so we all know about the pros of making a paid game, which is it essentially filters out people who don't care about it. But then you end up with the opposite problem, of course, with the free game, the free version of the game. Like, I can guarantee you that if we put out a free version of Crashlands, it would have probably 1 to 1.5 stars lower on the stores.
Yes.
For 2 reasons. One is we would have to do something, like what you said, Sam, which is somehow find a way to put ads into it or something, so that we could actually, sustain our studio through that.
Which means inevitably about 5 to 10% of people would go say, there are too many ads in this free game.
Right. So there's that problem. On the alternative, we could try to literally treat it as a demo version of the game or something and just put a stopping point in the game and say, hey, do you want to keep playing? Go play the full game.
But then you get review bombed.
Then you get a bunch of 1 stars. So either way, we get hurt from that. And then the other thing is when you put a game out for free, you get people downloading it who actually aren't that interested in it, but maybe they just saw it or they heard about it somewhere or whatever. And since it costs them effectively nothing to download it, they will get it. And so you end up getting a much, much larger group of players, yes, but most of whom don't actually want to be playing your game.
I guess it's kind of like thinking about your Facebook friends versus your actual friends.
Yeah, basically.
It's a quality thing, right? I mean, we can just say this from our experience between the two, since we've done both. Like the people that we get to interact with and who actually bought Crashlands up front for either $5 or $15 or both, they're just much more. They're more of the people that we want to have as our players at the end of the day. Truthfully, the players who also pay us money during like in a free to play context are also that for sure. But the difference is that they come along with 99 other people. Every single one of them comes with 99 other people
who just don't care.
Who don't care, and weirdly are like, for some reason, the freeness of the game makes people more mean to you as a developer, which
they do. Well, it's that you give an inch.
Understood.
It's give an inch and they'll take a mile kind of a thing. Like by putting your game out for free, you've already demonstrated to people that that you're willing to just give up something that you've put a lot of time into, right? And they will take more of your time.
Yeah. Well, now every time you ask something of them, it feels like much more of an affront because they got so much. Because the fact is, if we make Crashlands free, you would get so much game for free that if we at any point did anything to inhibit that, like throw an ad in your face or ask you to do an IAP for something, then you would feel like something was being taken away from you.
A big something.
Big something. Even though you never paid for it. Because the thing is, like, what a player will end up doing is investing their time into the game. And so the more time they invest in the game, the more they feel like that's their thing now. And now the more they feel like you're taking away from them by constantly reminding them that they should be paying you for this thing.
Yeah, and just to kind of throw some numbers behind this idea of free players don't care about your game. What we've seen in the past with our free games is that, and these are games that, you know, got great reviews from critics, have generally, you know, good review scores from people on the Play Store and stuff like that. But the uninstall rate on day one is like 75%.
It's very high.
Yeah. So 3 out of 4.
Normal. That's normal for a free game.
It might even be on the, you know, the better end. So
that's also ignoring the fact that most people who don't uninstall it the first day will still never actually even boot it up and play it anyway.
Yeah.
Right. They'll uninstall it later sometime after. They'll be looking at it and be like, I don't know what this is, and just uninstall it, you know, 5 weeks after they're down.
Yeah. So I mean, it's exciting as a dev because you're like, ooh, we have 2 million downloads, but, you know, cut out 3/4 of those right out of the gate. And then of the 25% who are left, you know, take another maybe 10% of those are people who are actually going to take time and play the game. And then
10% of those will buy it from you.
Yeah. So the funnel is crazy, and almost everybody then who sees the game, you don't actually get to interact with, and it's just not good. So if you don't have to do it, don't do it.
Yeah. But if you're there just to grow your audience and get more, you know, people in the door, it's extremely viable, and especially if the game supports it. I mean, we talk about all these things in
well, but that's not true.
A lot of ways. It is. I mean, like with regards like League of Legends, for example. Like,
but that's a perfect example of one that you're no more likely to be successful making a free-to-play game than you are making a paid-up-front game.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
I mean if anything, you're less likely.
You're more likely to be successful making any game than any other game, I would
Most
say.
games are very unsuccessful.
You're better off doing almost anything else, actually.
Better off raking leaves around the neighborhood, probably.
Yeah, you do a lot better, actually. I don't even think it's a question of like which one works. It's that if you're gonna, and this is a thing that I think worked for us okay, but was also maybe not the right way to do it, which was we started with free to play because we thought we had to, and that may or may not have been right. I currently think it was probably right, but who knows? But the idea was start to grow a player base so that we have more and more people who are interested in what we're doing that we can continue to sell stuff to. But here's the thing. If you have 2 million players, but the vast majority of them uninstalled your game on day one, the vast majority of those that are left never bought anything from you, then you actually only have a few thousand players.
Right. It's the Facebook friends versus real friends situation again. Like, they don't actually care.
No,
So
those are the people who might buy the next thing you make, is those 1,000 people that are left. But if you had made a paid up front game, you might have been able to sell 1,000 copies anyway.
Well, and there's the sort of side conversation about, you know, it depends on what store you're on. Like if you're putting it onto iTunes, Google Play, there's separate sections for paid games and free games.
Yeah.
People who go into the paid games section are people who are looking to pay money for a game. People who go into the free games section are not. And so many more free games come out than paid games. It's probably something on the order of like 95% free, I would imagine.
A lot more, yeah.
There's just a much bigger competition pool there as well. So, yeah, I don't know. It's tricky.
Mm-hmm.
very tricky, but you got to make sure that whatever you do with your game is aligned with whatever you're trying to do as a studio. So our goal is to, you know, move into the premium space, get a huge player base that actually cares about us, and that we can say, hey, we got t-shirts for this, or hey, hey, we got a new game coming out, and that they will actually respond. So having just free-to-play players doesn't really...
Yeah, I'd say a big part of the motivation behind pushing to make Crashlands a premium game was that kind of realization that we had, I think prior to Crashlands, we had 4 something million players across all of our games, or downloads.
I think it was 3, yeah.
But as far as actively engaged people, I think it was about 1%, if that. So, it looks like huge numbers, but as far as actually trying to grow a fan base and build a sustainable business out of it, it's not really going to put you in that much of a better position as if you had made a paid game, probably.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll move on to the next question, which is just a general question from Gafferman. It's kind of a goofy one, which is good. You've been chosen as representatives for humanity's first contact with extraterrestrials. How do you proceed?
I'd probably set up a Skype call. I don't want to meet the extraterrestrials face to face.
Maybe they don't even have faces to meet.
They probably
prefer
have
to use
butts
Discord.
with their faces. Yeah,
Because
Discord.
The Skype call would probably cut out and then become garbled, and then they would think we said something that would cause an intergalactic war.
It's a very elaborate
I'm just
situation.
saying, you should
Wait a
avoid
minute.
Skype.
Here's a question.
Hmm.
Did we go to their planet or did they come to ours?
I feel like it's very important that establishes the power difference.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, if this was happening right now, it'd have to be them coming to us.
Let's assume that.
Or what if it's actually neither? What if it's
We met in the middle.
No, it's none of those scenarios at all. What if it's instead we just say we think aliens are out there, so let's just fire off a radio contact from some representatives of humanity.
I
think so part of the important thing about like building a relationship with someone is knowing what they're interested in, what they care about, like being able to listen to them, and I feel like, I guess it's the same reason why people get like really scared about approaching people in public, like at a grocery store or something.
Because they might be aliens.
Yeah, because they might be wearing the skin of a human.
They might be Donald Trump supporters.
Well, it's because you don't actually you don't know
that would be
anything
even
about
worse.
them. You don't know anything about them, so as a result you have no basis to actually say something which is intelligible, which I feel like this is that effect on a cosmic scale. This is the approaching the cute girl at the grocery store on a cosmic scale right here. You got to figure out like what can you go up and be like, hey, I also like chicken noodle soup. Can you do that?
I
Is that a thing you could
feel
do
like,
with
though-
aliens? I feel like you wouldn't be able to know what the hell they want. What do they care about?
Here's the problem, though. I feel like if aliens came here, I feel like we should all be kind of embarrassed a little bit.
Kind of.
Like, just because.
Be like, look at this planet we fucked up.
Well, 'cause
Adam's
right
not
now-
disagreeing with the direction, just with the
Just the
amplitude.
degree. Because
Yeah.
right now, we have this kind of very instinctive tribal nature built into our human psyche, where we tend to define ourselves as relative to some other, right? And once we actually come in contact with aliens, the other will no longer be like people who are of a different religion or nationality from you who you're supposed to be fighting with or whatever, or people who are across the political aisle or, whatever it is, the dividing lines that people have drawn. Now all of a sudden it's going to be there's us and then there's the aliens. And when people start looking at themselves as just part of the collective whole of humanity, it becomes very obvious that we've just done a really, really shitty job of doing anything cohesive or cooperative, just like as a planet.
Personally, I think
You know what I mean?
this is a super optimistic view of humanity you have in this scenario.
No, I'm saying we should be embarrassed.
Yeah, but
I
what
don't-
will really happen?
I don't know if we will be. We might just
No.
nuke them. I don't
What
know.
what will really happen is 5 or 6 nations would be trying to figure out how to nuke the aliens. Another couple would be trying to figure out how to form diplomatic relationships with them.
Oh, it's going to be a
And-
clusterfuck.
And then a bunch of religions would be sacrificing themselves. A bunch of other ones would become militant and try to kill the aliens.
Some of them would try to convert the aliens.
Yep, and that would be the best case scenario.
Have you heard
And
about
then in the
Space
end,
Jesus?
Space. And then in the end, all of the people involved would end up fighting each other about what to do to interact with the aliens, and would end up killing each other anyway.
So the aliens would land, and then the humans would be like, "Okay, cool. It's good talk. We'll go chat about this. We'll be back." and then
And
within
then
24
we'll
hours,
just go kill each other.
the
and
entire
then-
planet's destroyed.
And
the
aliens will be
aliens
like,
emerge
well,
and they're-
I guess we'll just move in here after the radiation dies down, and then
Yeah.
that'll be that, I guess.
Maybe that's what happened in the first place. Maybe that's how we got here, you know?
Yeah,
Maybe that's how dinosaurs,
You know?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know?
That's how that's how dinosaurs.
All right. Next question comes from Goober Goobs.
It's good.
Who
it's a
asks,
good name.
as much as you guys enjoy doing the game jams, would you ever consider hosting a game jam for the Butterscotch community?
We actually should do that.
We did do one called the Butterscotch Jam once, which we offered for anybody to hop into, but nobody did.
The
because
community
nobody knew
was
we
super,
existed.
super tiny at that point.
There was no community at that time.
I think someone tweeted at us. They're like, "This sounds cool." That
Well, the problem was the
extent.
Butterscotch Jam took place during the workday on Monday through Friday.
Also, it was 5 8-hour jam.
It was 5 separate
Yeah.
games.
Yeah,
It
that
might have
was-
been a little much for.
most
the
most people
general
have a pretty hard
populace.
time with a 48-hour jam on a weekend.
Well,
We
but
were
there
doing-
are also plenty of jams that people can get involved with already. So to me, the question is, what would we do that made it
Ooh.
interesting enough to actually do the Butterscotch Jam?
Or could we get a coalition of butterscotches together and all jump onto a jam?
Jam jump.
The
Basically-
Butterscotch Jam Jump of 2016.
The Jam Jack.
Yeah, the Jam Jack. We'll
There's-
hijack a jam.
I would like to do. I think Ludum Dare.
It's coming up.
I think it's coming up pretty soon.
Yeah.
That might be a fun one to do. But
Would you want a butterscotch
We
hijack
can't.
jam?
No,
it?
that one's really big. We can't hijack that. There's no. There's no way that. would
there's
work.
usually something
Okay,
like
what if we did this?
1,300 participants.
What if we did this? So if we said, okay, the weekend before whatever this jam is, we will have a couple-hour workshop via Google Hangouts on the internet where we say, here's kind of how we think about making games to make them really, really fast over the course of a weekend that are actually usable and good. So it's like a little learning session.
Yeah.
And then we hijack the jam.
Jam Jack,
We jam jack it, and then
we jam
and then,
jump,
and
into
then
the
everybody
jam.
who did it, who's also a B-Scotch, we find some place to pool all the games together, so we can all be like, yeah, we did a thing, or whatever.
Yeah, that is something that I've been wanting to do more of as a studio. I mean, we've been so immersed in Crashland's work that we haven't gotten to do as much of this as I think we would have liked. But just the aspect of education and teaching people about game dev. And we used to do a mentorship program called the 8-Bit Dev Pipe. So we did 2 rounds of that. And I think
That's
we're going
fun. I enjoyed the crap out
yeah, I
of it.
think we're going to fire that up again probably once Adam comes up to St. Louis
Yeah.
in some new incarnation. Yeah, I mean, it's something we've always liked to do. And we're always giving talks and seminars and stuff up here. So yeah, doing something that's more jam focused, I think would be super fun.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
let's
I
do it.
do think the only reason to do it is if we can add something interesting on top.
Like hot sauce.
Yeah, otherwise we might as well let other people organize it and just go to theirs because it's
Jam jack.
It's a
Jack-
lot less work, and then we get to jam instead of organizing a jam.
Yeah, butterscotch is Jack the
Yes,
Jam.
yeah. So we'll find somebody else's jam. We will host an event the weekend before, teach people about jamming. Then we'll jam jack it. I like it.
Jam jacket. All right, cool. Last question, maybe. Seth, how are we doing on time?
I think we could probably do 2 more if we do them
All right.
kind of quick.
2 questions. This one's from Roxton, who's a new question asker, which is exciting. Asks, the psychology of jackpots. Diablo does it with random progressive loot. Crashlands does it with component rare drops. It's a spectrum. At what point do you think it becomes either lazy game design or even abusive to the user?
Well, here's a question. What makes it lazy
Or
Well,
abusive.
it's
or abusive? Yeah.
this has a strangely negative tone to it.
It's very accusatory.
It is. I feel like maybe Roxton's got some feelings about the drops.
Let's start from the other side. What is the reason to have
What's the point?
random loot? What does
Okay.
it do?
The reason is that doing the same thing over and over again is not that interesting, and that is the most efficient way to make a game, actually. So in Quadrupus Rampage, what do? You just beat the hell out of a lot of fish.
Same thing. Over and over and over
Thousands
again.
and thousands of fish. In Crashlands, you are chopping trees and, whatever. You're just building stuff and
Hundreds and
harvesting
hundreds of
resources.
trees.
Wait,
by the time-
wait,
by the
you're
time you're
harvesting
done-
thousands of things and killing thousands of things.
Yes. If every tree you cut down dropped 1 log and always 1 log and nothing new, nothing else, just that, you would get bored because, as they say, variety is the spice of life. And
Maybe it's more like the crack cocaine of life is what Roxton's getting at.
but I
feel like.
think surprises are one of the core foundations of what makes anything fun. So I mean, you could apply this to anything in life. So imagine you're watching your favorite soccer team, right? Let's say, or football, depending on where you live. let's say for the past 20 years, they've won every single match 3-2. They've played thousands of matches, and every match turns out exactly the same. Would you keep watching that? Like, it's always going to end up the same, right? So you no longer give a shit because, like, why would you watch those matches? Mm-hmm. It's not knowing what's going to come next that makes the match interesting. And
so
having
in other
all the
words,
surprises.
The loot drop system is a way to make an interaction that happens a lot go from being maybe some tedious boredom piece after a short period of time to being just continually interesting.
Yeah, well, the difference between boredom and fun is the element of surprise, really. I mean, that's pretty much where that lies, I think.
So where do you think going to this idea? So that's kind of the point then, right? Is that as a game designer, I mean, taking it back even one step further mechanically, we can't make it so that it's different every time you cut the tree, right? If you had to play like a different mini game, if it was like
we can't develop that. Like there's not enough
too
hours
broad of a spectrum of content.
Yeah. So I guess that's the sense of where the laziness comes in, right? In principle, we could.
I mean, we could.
But here's the thing: that would be a way shittier game.
Oh yeah,
it would be really hard to play. But it's also like that's not a question of. There's a fine line between laziness and not having enough resources. Actually, I shouldn't say there's a fine line, but from the player's perspective, like I'll often hear players accuse developers of being lazy about this feature or that feature in a game that's really, really complicated or huge in a lot of ways and clearly took a ton of resources to make. And it's weird to think that a dev would like put so much time and energy and manpower into everything in the game and then for some reason become lazy when it comes to like one specific feature. I don't think laziness really factors into it. I think it's just a matter of resources that you have to allocate, right? Mm-hmm. So
yeah, though it can be lazy though, because not all randomness is the same, you know, like because the idea here is that you're trying to make it so that someone just doesn't quite know what to expect, right? So in the case of Crashlands, when you hack a tree down, it always gives you between like 1 and 3 logs,
and maybe some sawdust and maybe seed.
If we also allowed it to give you nothing, then that would suck. It would feel horrible to like do a little bit of work and then get no reward, right?
Yeah, true randomness is the laziest and the worst game design.
Yeah, you need to have it's actually designing a good random system that feels good is actually very, very difficult.
It takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a balance problem. So I think it actually is true that you can have. Actually, I would take Magicite. We were just talking about this earlier. Magicite is a super fun game, but there's something that you'll notice when you play it that feels really bad, and it might not be obvious, but it's that it's a random. The levels are randomly generated, which is fine. They're pretty fun, well laid out levels, but the bad guys on them are completely randomly distributed. Meaning, when you start it's a roguelike, so once you die, you're dead forever to start over. But you may start a new game, and the first thing you're confronted with is a bad guy that would require 100 hits from you that can kill you in 1 or 2 hits, and that is so tall it takes up the entire space, so you can't get around it. So that would be a good example. Yeah, that's a good example of just like kind of lazy randomness.
Would you call that abusive?
No, to me that's just I would put it on the lazy side. Yeah, it's just not fun. Yeah. But that is a good question. Is like, at what point can it become abusive? Because like, to me, this is probably getting at, is the idea of a game behaving like a gambling device.
Right. Which, I mean, interestingly, you know, there's been more. We've talked about this a bit with Clash Royale that just came out too. But there's been more and more. It seems like sort of tilting toward those mechanisms in free to play games. You know, more so than pay up front games.
Yeah, just because that's their whole job, is to get you to play it as much as possible.
Right, and the way they make money is from that. So you know, even something like in Hearthstone, for example, the fact that you buy a little pack of cards and it opens up and you get 5 random cards out of it. You know, that's the sort of thing where like, yeah, you're sure the player's buying something that's useful for themselves, but that's the thing. Like, the fact that it's a maybe is the weird thing where it starts crossing the line from being, if you paid for it, it starts crossing into the questionable gambling territory.
Yeah, but I think I agree. I'm not going to disagree, but I think I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Sure, yeah. Well, this is a weird line.
It's good to explore. If you bought Crashlands for $5 or $15 and you had never played it before, you have no idea whether it's actually going to be something you enjoy.
Sure.
So just like buying a pack of cards in Hearthstone, which by the way costs the same amount as the entire game of Crashlands.
I don't think that's true though,
Yeah, I think this
because
is different.
there's an information asymmetry there, right? So in the case of buying Crashlands, you could read if you wanted
That's
to.
true. You can do some
10,000
research.
goddamn 5-star reviews and be like, okay, this is probably a game that I want. Like,
It's probably pretty medium.
so you actually get to actually the number of stars itself, basically, like on a review aggregation, is basically the measurement of the risk involved with you throwing $5 at it.
Correct.
When you buy a pack of cards in a game, that could be anything.
It's just random.
It's just random. You have no way of actually estimating the cost to you of that $5 purchase. So then in that case, I would say that you're gambling without actually a sense of what the reward is.
So is the idea then that it's not necessarily abusive, but has the potential to be abusive as soon as the randomness is attached to the player's finances?
Yeah, I would say absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah,
I think
I'd say that's fair.
I think it's the case. Just because of the case that it then does transfer slightly too far into gambling territory, at least in my mind. But I think in general, general random drop systems. So for example, in Diablo 3 is a good example. Like Diablo 3 is one of the games that if I want to just kind of chill out, like that's one of the games that I actually go do and chill out in, because of the fact that the way that they did their random drop system is such that it just makes me feel great for playing the game. And
Yeah, you'll just find some better stuff periodically just by playing.
And yes, in that sense, it is addictive, but I think there's always this weird line that people straddle when it comes to the question of addiction and games, and just the general, what is a game doing that is positive or negative or whatever else. And there's questions of escapism and the benefits or negative sides of that, as well as this question of addiction. But I think the weird thing is, like, it's an interesting thing to think about, because the reality is our job is to make people have a really good time. And
And on the other side,
And that's
to
something
not
that they-
ruin someone's life as a consequence.
Yeah. Well, that's how we think about it. We try to think holistically about it. But
Yeah.
even if you're not, like, the point is your job as a game developer, for the most part, unless you're making like, horror games or something, but as a game developer, for the most part, your job is to make people feel good, make people happy, and like that sort of give them a sense of achievement. And the reality is that depending on their life situation, they may only be getting that from a game or, some other form of media entertainment.
Yeah.
And is that dangerous to offer them at that point?
Well, or think
I
about
don't
it.
know.
Think about it this way, right? It's also just the capability of a thing to do bad, right? Because yeah, it's true that in a game like Diablo, the random nature of drops can sort of kick some addictive behaviors in.
Mm-hmm.
But for the vast majority of people, that's a handleable kind of thing, and the kind of impact it can have on your life is getting people to play the game too much and having trouble going and doing other things. So it can impact people in real ways, and in that sense, it's dangerous. But the likelihood of that happening to any one person is not very high.
Sure.
Versus
I think,
like
yeah.
to finish, something like Clash Royale or Clash of Clans, right, where there's no limit to how much money you can spend in these games, and in fact, spending more money makes you do better, and it's possible to really put in hundreds of dollars a day into this kind of game without any, and this is all being done via a credit card, so you don't actually see the effects until you look at your credit card statement at the end of the month. And so in here, because of the sort of defray between, I guess, because of the real high costs of things and the uncapped costs of things, where all these addictive things are being rewarded immediately, where the cost of them is being defrayed into the future, so you don't actually see it until later, then that has really very obvious room to cause
Easily
a lot
abusable.
of damage. And it can, and I would say it in itself isn't necessarily inherently abusive. It just has a lot of potential to cause really bad consequences to happen to a large number of people.
Yeah,
I guess maybe sorry, go ahead, Seth.
I was gonna say, even ignoring the financial side of things, I am a person who has had been significantly impacted by gaming addiction.
That's true.
There's probably about a 2-year period of my life where I think I probably put in 200 days of World of Warcraft, which is not to say I played it for 200 days out of those 2 years. It's like hour by hour. If you add it all up, all those hours I played, it adds up to 200 days.
Right.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, it was not the fault of the game. I mean, the developers of the game, their job is to make something that's really, really entertaining and engaging and, gives you that sense of accomplishment and doing cool things or whatever. And on the flip side, like there's an equal responsibility for me as a player to understand that it's not real, and that every hour I spend in that game is super fun and enjoyable, but I also have an actual real life that I need to take care of. And so I don't know. I feel like there's a mutual responsibility.
Well, I guess here's my question on that, because is it just the case that, like any manufacturing of any product, so take pencils as a weird alternative to games, there is certain danger inherent in the making of your product, of almost any product.
Everything can be abused.
Yeah, well, in the sense that like there's potential loss associated with whatever you make whenever that thing also gives people gains. So in the case of a pencil, for example, we can take two examples. One, someone trips and you just get stabbed by a shitload of pencils they're holding. The fact that you made those pencils killed them.
Had they not been holding those pencils you made,
right?
That person would still be
Another
here
softer
with us.
example, maybe someone just took one pencil in with them to a test. Your pencil broke. Your pencil had a structural failure that they couldn't get another pencil on for the test. Now they failed their test. Their life is ruined.
They don't go to college.
And I guess so. The interesting thing is like maybe just the inherent danger in the making of games is this addiction side, right?
That is exactly right though, because the whole point of the game is that it's supposed to be a really amazing thing to escape into.
Right.
And that is a really, really appealing thing. And like you had mentioned, Sam, for somebody who, for whatever reason, isn't satisfied with their life. And for me, it was the frustration of basically being in college and not knowing why I was there and not having a life plan and basically just being generally confused about everything in my life. It was very easy for me to jump into games where my goals were super clear. Like, I'm going to level up. I'm going to hit exalted reputation. I'm going to get that next sword or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really easy to just allow that to take over your life because it's just a much easier place to exist. But, it's hard to say, like, if I didn't have that game, I don't think it's fair to say that I would have had my life in order.
Or that you would have found some other and maybe worse outlet.
Yeah, like maybe I
mean,
who knows what it would have been.
Yeah, as far as addictions go, as long as it's not to a free-to-play game, being addicted to just a pay once game,
or at least a capped
not the
game.
worst. I mean, this reminds me of actually. It's a funny thing. It's kind of a stupid thing to say, but it reminds me of when I got diagnosed with lymphoma cancer, because they were like, oh well, I mean,
it's not the worst
of all
cancer.
the cancers. Of all the cancers to get, it's not the worst one to get.
It's not as good as testicular cancer, but it's all right.
That's exactly what they said. It's not as good as testicular, but it's way better than stomach or bone or something. I'm like, great, thanks.
You're
guys.
like, sweet.
Still have cancer.
Yeah. Well, actually,
high fives all
that's
around.
an interesting way to look at it, right? Because the danger of addictive things is for people who have trouble with addictive things.
Yeah, for 99% of the people who interact with it, it's no problem. But for 1%, it really is a problem. So
it is important though to on the game developer side to be aware of that fact that you're making it a thing that, because of what its purpose is, can cause that kind of damage to a small set of people. And so the only thing that I think is just absolutely your responsibility is to be aware of that and try not to do things that could cause immense amounts of harm.
Yeah.
Because
Like,
there
to me,
are
it's-
definitely there are things that you can do to a game's design, depending on, for example, if the loops are designed in a certain way that make a person need to feel like they need to come back every 5 minutes, or a thing that makes them feel like they need to pay money to you every 5 minutes forever, then things like those can end up causing people with addictive personalities to get just sucked so hard into that thing that it becomes a part of their life they can't get away from.
Right. And I mean, it is part of the reason why our general approach to free to play has been weird, in the sense that it doesn't follow the actual free to play models, where there's still always a payment cap.
Which is also why it's been unsuccessful for us.
Yeah, exactly. That's completely true.
Yeah.
Because the reality, and our players love it, because they're like, oh my God, this is the best free to play implementation because I don't have to pay anything.
and we're like, damn it.
Yeah, I do have to, which actually makes me think though that I think the video ad and ad supported method, where players actually can't or don't need to pay anything but can watch ads instead, is a hell of a lot more ethical of a way to do free.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I don't mind that one at all. Actually,
Yeah.
I mean, I of course it breaks immersion, but I mean,
Yeah, I would
That's a
much rather
small
have
price.
a capped payment where they could be like, pay $5, never see an ad, and get all the normal stuff that's in the game, right?
Well, that's just, I mean, to me, it's a hilarious sort of sort of mismatch between people, like the way that people actually value their time and then like the perceived value of doing things. So like I personally, I don't want to watch ads, period. I don't want people to be like trying to sell me shit. But if like I could watch 100 video ads and it would take me like a half an hour or something.
Mhm.
And I could get, quite a few things in these various games. But on the flip side, I could probably go mow a lawn in a half hour and get $20. And
Right. Maybe you've recognized that someday you're going to die, and maybe you don't want to spend 30 minutes of your life watching ads.
just having
to get
people
a
trying to
skin and crossy
fucking
road.
sell me bleach or
Yeah.
whatever. I got all the bleach I need. Thanks.
Yeah, although, but it's also true that a very large fraction of people just can't buy stuff, and so ads are really the only option. I mean, to me, the most interesting group of people when it comes to free to play and just payment models in general are those who can afford to pay for stuff and just choose to waste their time instead,
Yes.
and get angry when a game is $3 instead of $2, right? Because that game is too expensive for what it is, right? To me, that's the interesting niche of people. Because I think the one value of free to play, inarguably, is it allows people who can't afford to play games or to buy games to still play them.
And they can pay for it in a sense.
Yeah, and somebody else is paying for it on their behalf, and they sacrifice their time to do it, which is actually it's about how payment works, right? Is you give your time to somebody and they give you some money in return.
Time is money, friend.
And I think it's a pretty shitty job to watch ads, of course, but
That's your job now.
for a lot of people, and I think it's an important thing to recognize that if you watch ads to pay for things in games, you're actually being paid to watch advertisements. And if that's cool with
That's
you,
your job.
more power to you. Or if it's your only option, then that's actually great that is an option.
Yeah.
So I mean, to me, that's the one thing that I think is unfortunate about our departure from free to play is that there is now a large set of people who would love to play our games, but just can't. Although on the other hand, we know that most of those are pirating the game anyway, so it probably works out in the end.
Yeah.
But
also,
there's a handful of honest people who would love to play the game and aren't willing to steal it, which I'm happy for, but I also now feel bad about because they have no other way to get it.
Yeah, but I do think though that we've priced things pretty reasonably, and so if somebody has a super tight budget or something, but they still want to play Crashlands, it's $5, and over the course of a couple months or something, you could definitely make it happen. So,
well, it actually reminds me too. We talked about this in the past, right? Of back when we were kids and we just had a small allowance for mowing the lawn and that kind of stuff, and we had to save money to buy games for $20 then.
yeah.
Or PC games anyway.
Well, Game Boy games were $30, I recall.
PC games were actually, I guess PC games were probably already $30 by then.
They were
up there. It was a couple months of mowing.
Yeah, we had to do a lot of work
to
to get those. And when we bought a game, that was the only game, and there weren't free to play games, although shareware was starting to come out because the internet was coming out at the same time, or becoming more widely available. We grew up at a time where you had to work and raise a bunch of money and then go buy one game and then you're out, and it was a big risk.
Fortunately, that was the only
you
game that came
know.
out that month, so it's
there were a
fine.
lot of games out there, or at least the only one that was available at CompUSA on the shelf.
Yeah,
Well, next to some casino games because those have been around forever and will never go away.
yeah.
But there was something that also felt really good about that. It's like you put all this money
You
together.
earned that shit.
You earned it.
It's the RPGization of lawn mowing is what that is.
That's right.
The quest reward is you get to go buy Diablo 2.
It's fucking right.
And then you bring it home and you're so pumped about it, and it has a real sense of ownership and connection, and the fact that Blizzard became a household name, the developers of the game, which that doesn't happen for free to play games,
Yeah.
except for the ones at the very top, just because the names
Rovio
are thrown around
yeah,
so
I mean,
much.
Rovio tried to make it happen for them, but now those guys are in a world of pain. Right?
Yeah, that's not
They know what
working
they're
out so
trying
They do have a movie coming out though, so who
to
knows?
do. Yep, they did diversify into film for some reason. So,
All right, well, I think that's all the time we have. I think we went a little bit over, but we did miss
Definitely.
2 weeks, so we're trying to make up for lost time. So,
mhm.
so yeah, thank you all for listening. And if you want to check out our games, head on over to games.bscotch.net. We also have a community over at forums.bscotch.net. So if you hop on over there, you can say hello, and we may even wave back. And like I mentioned earlier, if you want to get your questions onto the podcast, you can ask at podcast.bscotch.net. And we do a fresh set of questions every week, so there's a pretty good chance that you'll get your question on here. All right, any last words, guys?
Nope.
All right, then thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.